Good evening, everybody. Keith here. Hoping everybody's having a good day, enjoying life, living life, loving life. I don't know what's going on up there in the Northeast, Oregon and Washington area, Northern California and all that, with all the fires and dust storms and rain and everything, but it's cold here in Iowa today. Cold and rainy and drizzly, so stay warm. In the meantime, I wanted to get on here and talk about mutual agreements and stuff. Mutual credit. Where does mutual credit extend from? And what are these supposed mutual agreements based on? And so I started doing a little research, and I came up with this. This is part of the United States Code, and this is 10 U.S. Code, which is Armed Forces. General military law, service, supply, and procurement. And when we're talking procurement here, we're specifically talking about acquisitions, and this is directly relative to federal acquisition regulations, where everything is done under contract terms and conditions, are required to implement statutes or executive orders commercial item. This is why they have fines, fees, penalties, taxes, and all that, and everything's monetary. And they're in accordance with cooperative agreements with NATO allies and other countries. Other cooperative agreements. NATO is North Atlantic Treaty Organization. Allies, North Atlantic Treaty Organization. It says nothing about nations. It's talking about the treaties. And the allies in other countries, other cooperative agreements. And so when we go down and we read this, it says authority to accept use of real property, services, and supplies from foreign countries in connection with mutual defense agreements and occupational arrangements. Okay? Armed forces, military law. Their occupations are professions. The doctors, lawyers, bankers, judges. These are the people that are filling up all these positions as occupational arrangements. Arrangement. As in this case, it is disorder. Because there is an already order certain. First in time is first in line. If it's not mutual with that, you can't defend it. In regards to the corporate government of the armed forces under the general military law, giving services, supplies, and procurement, cooperative agreements with NATO allies and other countries, other cooperative agreements, the arrangement is out of order. I'm going to go on and show you. Because of their occupation of a foreign land. Read again, people. The land shall not be sold forever, for the land is mine, for ye are strangers and sojourners with me. They admit in their military law that they occupy foreign land. And they agree. The agreements are to defend it. If you think you can take away Mother Earth's ability to fend for herself, you are a total, complete buffoon. We are to fend for the land. The land shall not be sold forever. The land is mine, for ye are strangers and sojourners with me. With me. How dare they think so in such a buffoon manner that they can defend a land by occupation? That's just idiocy. So already we see the arrangement is out of order. So therefore it can't be mutual. So let's talk about the importance of this mutuality. We're talking about mutual credit. See, I don't need credit. He's with me. He's the one that wants your credit. He's the one that wants you to see the same he sees, that which he created, the truth. He doesn't want you to be blinded by another man's lies. And so the mutuality we're talking about here in regards to credit comes from the origin of the word or term known as credit. It comes from credence, credentials, that which we give credence to. Now, if you're going to give credence to their codes and legislation and stuff without realizing where the true credit comes from, which they are in mutual agreement with because that's where they got them from, then again, you join that same class of buffoons. So, let's get back to the mutual part here. It says mutual credit. And then it says in parentheses, sometimes called multilateral barter. Check this out. A multilateral exchange is a transaction or forum for transactions which involve more than two parties. The land shall not be sold forever, for the land is mine. Guess what? If you're claiming a nation, a country, or anything like that, foreign, occupation, you're talking about a mutual connection here. For ye are strangers and sojourners with me. With me. The Father, the Son, and the Holy Ghost. The Father, the Son, and the Holy Ghost. The Holy Ghost is the Christ in Eucharist. The Christ in Eucharist, as the religions perform it, is a wafer in the wine. The Christ in Eucharist as yourself is the body and the blood within it. The person is enacted by that. So we see God as that person as well. He's not a respecter of persons. Because that's not what counts. It's the actions that count. A good man or a bad man can be turned good, just like a good man can be turned bad. So it's the actions at any given instance that determines whether he's with you or not. This is your assertion of mutuality. If you're going to make a mutual agreement, you make sure that he's with you first so that you can provide that multilateral barter, that multilateral exchange. A multilateral exchange is a transaction or forum for transactions which involve more than two parties. More than two parties. If God is not part of the agreement, if he is not part of the agreement first, are you just making an agreement with another man? And it says, for example, Alice gives Bob an apple in exchange for an orange. That is a bilateral exchange. Bilateral. Both parties are involved and there's no third person. Okay? A multilateral exchange would involve a third party. For example, Alice gives an apple to Bob, who gives an orange to Charles, who gives a pear to Alice. You guys comprehend that? A multilateral exchange would involve a third party. For example, Alice gives an apple to Bob, who gives an orange to Charles, who gives a pear to Alice. By using their Federal Reserve notes, they violate both the multilateral and bilateral exchanges, and that's what makes them unilateral. It's a monopoly. It's not allowing for the use of oranges instead of apples. They're telling you you can only use apples and you can only exchange apples, and so therefore you only get apples in exchange. That way, when you go buy that, use that Federal Reserve note to exchange for a couch, that couch now becomes, in essence, Federal Reserve notes. This is their control over all of this stuff by saying, well, you use Federal Reserve notes to buy it, did you not? Well, yeah, and you got the Federal Reserve notes by some system of theft, right? Yep. Okay, we're going to take the couch. What if that couch is gone? Now they assess fines, fees, and penalties in Federal Reserve notes. And realize, people, when it comes to restitution, the restitution doesn't go back to the victim. The restitution goes to the state. So let's get on with it before we get too misguided here. And it says, sometimes called a multilateral barter, which we examined. Now check this out. Or credit clearing. Or credit clearing. What is credit clearing? Credit clearing is the practice according to which a small group of banks need to make many payments to each other, of adding up the payments and canceling them out before settling the remainder. That said nothing about the credit. It said about payments and adding up the payments and canceling them out. While clearing is about waiting for the payment to go through, credit clearing is about canceling out a payment with one coming in the opposite direction. This is what I mean by they've hypothecated or bifurcated and hypothecated the mutual credit arrangements, the order. They are using US dollar credit and issuing apples and issuing peanuts. And then saying you have to use the peanuts in all of your exchanges. That US dollar is a letter of credit. Whereas the Federal Reserve notes are known as liabilities. A letter of credit can't be a liability at all. It's telling you where the credit comes from. That's the mutuality. The credit has to be mutual. And I give all credit to him. If they're not going to give credit to him, then I'm sorry, they can't give me the actual value of the actual assets then that my actual good works do. They can't come near it. So we can't mutually agree on that arrangement. So let's get back to it. So now that we know what mutual credit is all about, we're going to talk about that reciprocity. Applicability of reciprocity. Reciprocity is mutuality. Applicability of reciprocity in foreign relations and intercourse. Wait a minute. Did we just talk about armed forces, general military law, service, supply, and procurement cooperative agreements with NATO allies and other countries, meaning those things that are foreign, other cooperative agreements from foreign countries in connection with credit, mutual credit, mutual reciprocity, foreign relations and intercourse, international bureaus, congresses, etc., privileges and immunities of international organizations. Reciprocity. That's where we find the applicability. And it says the privileges, exemptions, and immunities of international organizations. For the purpose of this subchapter, the term international organization means a public international organization. Uh-oh. We're going to see different here. Remember that one, folks. And of their officers and employees and members of their families, suites, and servants provided for in this subchapter shall be granted, notwithstanding the fact that similar privileges, exemptions, and immunities granted to a foreign government, its officers or employees may be conditioned upon the existence of reciprocity by that foreign government, provided that nothing contained in this subchapter shall be construed as precluding the Secretary of State from withdrawing the privileges, exemptions, and immunities provided in this subchapter from persons who are nationals. Remember what we talked about earlier, countries? Now we're talking who are nationals of any foreign country, on the ground that such country is failing to accord corresponding privileges, exemptions, and immunities to citizens of the United States. It is in fact the citizens of the United States who are failing to accord the corresponding privileges, exemptions, and immunities to us that are precluded or prescribed and may be conditioned upon the existence. Okay? Now look what we're talking about here when I told you to keep an eye on that country and nationals. This is international law from Wikipedia. I did a video on this the other day. I read most of this here, and then I went down and showed something else. This is the next part, and I'm going to read this one here now for this video because it's going to show us some things. It says the term international law. Remember, we just spoke about the international law here in regards to their applicability of international organization. International law is sometimes divided into public and private international law, particularly by civil law scholars who seek to follow a Roman tradition, divided into public and private law. International organizations. Means a public international organization in which the United States participates pursuant to any treaty or under the authority of any act of Congress authorizing such participation or making an appropriation for such participation, and which shall have been designated by the President through appropriate executive order. See that public international organization has to be done through a public or through an executive order. Guess what? Remember we spoke earlier about that acquisition, procurements, acquisition, and now we're talking about public international organization under an executive order. Title 48 of the Code of Federal Regulations, Federal Acquisition Regulation System. Federal Acquisition Regulation, clauses and forms, solicitation, provisions, and contract clauses. Federal Acquisition, Title 48. They're the public international organization. And it says right here, contract terms and conditions required to implement statutes or executive orders with, hyphen means with commercial items. Anytime they implement a statute or executive order, it must be done with commercial items attached. This is why they attach fines, fees, penalties, levies, taxes, and such, surcharges, all of this. Because it requires contract terms and conditions to implement it. They have to contract with you. Cooperative agreements. When we go further, it says Roman lawyers would have further distinguished jus gentium. Jus gentium or jus gentium is a concept of international law within the ancient Roman legal system and Western law traditions based on or influenced by it. The jus gentium is not a body of statute law or legal code, but rather customary law thought to be held in common by all gents. Peoples or nations. Peoples or nations. Again, not capitalized. In reasoned compliance with standards of international conduct. Standard of international conduct. Conduct is the cooperative agreement. It then goes on and talks about the law of nations and jus inter gentes, which is the body of treaties. UN conventions and other international agreements. Originally a Roman law concept, it later became a major part of public international law. Agreements between nations. Again, they're using lowercase nations. On this view, public international law is said to cover relations between nation states and includes fields such as treaty law, law of the sea, international criminal law, the laws of war, international humanitarian law, international human rights law, and refugee law. By contrast, this is the important part, by contrast, private international law, which is more commonly termed conflict of laws, concerns whether courts within countries claim jurisdiction over cases with a foreign element and which countries' laws apply. Now we're going to talk about the state, sovereign state, nation, and nation state, and the word country. As we see, and this is just a thought company site, differences between a country, state, and nation. It happens to be one that I came across. I read all kinds of material, and this one I tend to agree with in a sense of being able to describe it for the common man. And it says, while the terms country, state, sovereign state, nation, and nation state are often used interchangeably, there is a difference. Simply put, and before we go any further, international law, also known as law of nations, whether they want to call it public international law or private international law, is the name of a body of rules which regulate the conduct of sovereign states in their relation with another or with one another. Sources of international law include what we said, but this here is sovereign states. Remember, we have sovereign powers that come from the sovereign. While the terms country, state, sovereign state, nation, and nation state are often used interchangeably, there is a difference. Simply put, a state is a territory with its own institution and population. What are they instituting? Is it the mutual agreement? If that institution doesn't have a mutual agreement with the sovereign, then it can't claim sovereignty in a true sense. A sovereign state is a state with its own institutions and populations that has a permanent population, territory, and government. Its own institutions and populations that has a permanent population. Permanent as in eternal. Territory and government. It must also have the right and capacity to make treaties and other agreements with other states. No person has a capacity to make anything. The person is what is made. It cannot then turn around and create anything by making anything. The capacity lies in yourself. This is the sovereign state that you are in when you recognize your capacity to make treaties and other agreements with other states in multilateral barter, which involve more than the two parties by clarifying that third party. Me, with me. The land shall not be sold forever, for the land is mine, for ye are strangers and sojourners with me. Who is this me? This me is the same one that gives you passage. The Lord shall preserve thy going out, thy coming in from this time forth, and even forevermore. He didn't clarify from what country or nation, or what nation state, or what state. Why? Because none of that concerns him. He is the sovereign, and he shall preserve thy going out and thy coming in from this time forth, and even forevermore, no matter how anybody else wants to describe it. Period. Enforcement of your sovereign state, your state of being, the now time, and where it comes from, because he is with me now. A nation is a large group of people who inhabit a specific territory and are connected by history, culture, or another commonality. Thus, we have a definition of a nation state, which is a cultural group, a nation, that is also a state. And it goes and says, and may in addition be a sovereign state. Nation, state, sovereign? Nah. Nation, state, state of being sovereign? Nation, state, being of sovereign. Anyway, on with the next one. It says the word country can be used to mean the same thing as state, sovereign state, or nation state. It can also be used in a less political manner to refer to a region or cultural area that has a governmental status. Not a capacity, a status. Okay? Examples include the proper noun, wine country, or coal country. These are proper nouns, and displaced by wine country and coal country both. You can see these are commercial proper nouns for their intent of that proper noun is describing the commercial product, what is made in that status of country. It's commercial. It's capitalized for a reason. Whereas this here, country, just needs mere clarification. It's the person acting in agreements, but we're bringing that up to a national level through multilateral barter as nations of men who are told to go forth and build nations of men in his word. And therefore, that's why he's another party involved in this. If it's not done with his words, then he's not a partner and it's not the correct multilateral. You've got a third party that's operating under their institution of state. A territory with its own institutions and populations. However, they are not permanent populations. They do not have eternal life. Period. This is the fallacy of their state and territories. I explained yesterday in a video. We've got Terry, which stands for terrestrial, and Tory literally means traitor. And I'll reconfirm that today in this video. Tory, an outlaw. So when we see territory, and we know that Terry is terrestrial, we are an outlaw of the land. A sovereign state doesn't have a territory. It has its own institutions and populations that has a permanent population, territory, and government. This is biblical. That's the nation. The nation is a sovereign state. And that's why it's a nation state. We go on to read, one of a class of Irish robbers noted for outrages and savage cruelty, plunderer, originally pursuer, searcher, as in doctrine of discovery, I pursue, pursuit, a running up to, from run, or from pyroot, R-E-T, to run or roll, see Rotary. A lot of your Rotary organizations in town, they're Tories, they're outlaws. About 1646, it emerged as a derogatory term for Irish Catholics dispossessed of their land. And then it goes on down here, it says, a Tory has been properly defined to be a traitor in thought, but not in deed. If you're a traitor in thought first, then your deed has no consequence anyway. You have to be righteous in your thought. You can't be a Tory. You got to quit listening to history and learn how to make your own mutual agreements under multilateral barter. Now, credit clearing, they're discharging the payments through your use of Federal Reserve notes. And they're used to it being done that way, so they're demanding that now. As we go on, it says, qualities of a sovereign state. State, nation, and country are all terms that describe groups of people who live in the same place and have a great deal in common. But while states and sovereign states are political entities, the nations and countries might not be. As we saw earlier, countries can be commercial entities. Nations can also be commercial entities, but nations can also be a body of people, pure and simple, nothing else. And the thing they have in common is the mutual agreement already accepted in the Bible. His oath, love thy father with all thy heart, body, and soul. Honor thy father in heaven, honor thy mother in earth. Love thy neighbor with all thy heart, or love thy neighbor as yourself. And then we turn around, we see Leviticus is, land shall not be sold forever, for it is mine. And ye are, the Lord shall preserve thy going out, thy coming in from this time forth, and even forevermore. There is no distinction about where. So when we think about the traitor in thought, if you're not honoring the mother in the land, then you've already lost the thought of the mother and therefore are a traitor in thought. But again, like I said earlier in the video, you can't possibly believe that you can, in through your deeds, destroy Mother Nature so much that it can't fend for herself. The only description by which the laws have endeavored to come at them was that of non-jurors. Non-jurors. Or persons refusing to take the oath of fidelity to the state. This is Jefferson, Notes on the State of Virginia. A Tory has been properly defined to be a traitor in thought, but not in deed. The only description by which the laws have endeavored to come at them was that of non-jurors or persons refusing to take the oath of fidelity to the state. Before I formed thee in the belly, I knew thee. And before thou camest forth out of the womb, I sanctified thee, and I ordained thee a prophet unto the nations. I don't need to take an oath of fidelity to the state. I've already accepted his oath. And under that oath, I love him with all my heart, body, and soul. I honor him and his word in heaven. I honor the mother and what I observe in her in earth. And I love my neighbor as myself. That's my mutual agreement. That's my agreement of peace. That's my bill of peace. It costs nothing. It is freely given as it was given freely already. In prosperity and abundance, I owe no debt, and I claim no debt from anybody else. That's my mutual agreement. And I give all credit to that guy up there. Anyway, I hope you guys understand this. When it comes to reciprocity, the enforcement of their codes, especially under the military code here, as we see use of property and all this and that for mutual agreements, we have to realize these are all supposed to be mutual. Yep, mutual. And I say yes and no at the same time. No, I'm saying mutual. The whole thing. So think about that stuff, folks. I'm going to post my other forum links. And again, like I always say, I've got a new MeWe link, so you can check me out there. I always post the PayPal link. Please share all the information, all the videos, the forums, the links, and all that. but I'm hoping you'll hit that PayPal button as well, because I could certainly use some of those Federal Reserve notes in exchange. Hopefully I can show you people how to use the Federal Reserve notes one of these days to go buy gold. I've got other priorities I got to take care of before then, but I still need the Federal Reserve notes, doctrine of necessity. So I'm hoping you'll hit that, but in the meantime, remember, it still doesn't matter. I'm still going to be doing this no matter what. I'll find ways and means, but your help would be great in that mutual respect. In the meantime, remember, if it wasn't for you guys, I wouldn't be doing this. So God bless, have a great day, and I love you. Bye-bye.